Good morning. It's Tuesday, 22nd of April, and I'm with Ian Harris, President and CEO of Outcrop Silver. Ian, good to be with you.
Yeah, Peter, nice to see you again. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you. Obviously, we've just come back off of a long weekend here in the UK, and quite nice to see in my inbox first thing in the morning a nice juicy hit at because the Mangos target, wasn't it? Which was the target that we didn't get to go and see when we were on site, but it was the one that I remember Guillermo mentioning, which was a big step out down in the south of the license or the 17-kilometer corridor. And the theory was, if you hit here, you've proven that the whole system's mineralized, and that pathway to 100 million ounces is game on. So
That is the correct thesis. It's right at the end of our current permitted claims. So at the bottom of the 17 kilometers, continue to see very high grade primary silver. And we got an added bonus, right? This is an extremely thick intersect at 8 meters, right? So seeing this kind of grade over those kind of meters, although it's consistent throughout the entire trend, obviously it bodes well for our overall strategy for the year, which is adding as many ounces for the least amount of meters possible.
yeah, why don't we just familiarize us? Obviously, the documentary that we filmed, if you haven't watched it, I'd recommend going and seeing that. That's within the channel, but and I'll put a link to that in the description. But one would just take a step back. When you first did this resource, I think it was 2023, you released your maiden resource. There was about 37 million ounces of around 600 grams per ton, similar to what we're seeing in this hole, actually, which is very encouraging to see that the similar grades are all throughout. Um, you were on about 7 veins then. Now, with this hole adding to that inventory, how many holes are we up to in terms of veins that have been discovered that are mineralized, just so we can get a sense of where you were back in 2023 and the progress that you've made?
Yeah, the 2023 resource was basically based on six veins. Really, it was seven, but really six were the main contributors. One was a kind of a minor. And so far, have had four additional discoveries and pending assays on a potential fifth. So fingers crossed on that. And what's most important is that resource was in the top northeast section of the overall trend. It was very concentrated in that area where Mangos being on the far bottom, we've got the three other ones in the mid. So we're basically know that we've have a very significant pathway, and that's why we took the decision earlier in the year that this year we're going to be not just focusing, we're going to be primarily focusing on resource expansion because it's you don't go from 37 million to 100 million overnight, even though that's our overall target. But we want to say significant jumps, but we see a pathway to make the next big jump, which is very exciting, right? Because we actually started our drill program back in April of 2024. So we have been drilling continuously now for 12 months. And then the other part is for Mangos being on the southern edge of our overall permitted title block. Isn't just that we have a discovery and show the continuous, that it's a district scale. Really converts it into a district scale type program, but it also means we could, right? You were there. You saw the relationships we've developed. We've done over 100 right of ways, or not right of ways, but land use agreements to be able to do this. So we're over, a 17-kilometer swath where we've created a relationship where we have the ability to operate. We demonstrate that we have the ability to operate, right? Which I think is actually very exciting.
In terms of the significance of this vein, obviously, like we were saying, it's very significant because it's at the bottom of the license. All of the drilling before was right up in the north. So this does show the continuation of the trend, 17 kilometers of nice, super high grade mineralization. This is one of the highest grade undeveloped silver projects in the world. So that's a good tick. But also, I remember this being very close to the old Frias mine as well, down in the south. What's the plan there? Are there any plans with the Frias mine to go back and explore there?
Yeah, we had this debate go back and forth because we obviously have to also focus on resource drilling, right? So we want to make sure we get as many ounces, but we do still have in our plans to test around the Frias area, although it's a give and take, right? To see if we can get it done and still get the largest resource. And honestly, the hit at Mangos makes that decision more difficult because when you see 8 meters, I try and beat this in that we know what we're valued on. And we have a very similar valuation in terms of ounces, dollars per ounce in the ground with some of the other premier primary silver projects in the world. And so we know that if we add more ounces, we are going to add more value to our shareholders. We have a $12 million budget for a year, and when I say $12 million budget, that's for the entire company. That includes G&A and the, getting the, investor relation type activities, going to the conferences, plus the drilling, plus all the mid office in Colombia, right? And for 24,000 meters, right? I love that because its math is easy. That's $500 per meter, right? That's entire company. That is not all in. That is not a drilling cost. That is the entire corporation. So the number one goal is obviously adding as many ounces as possible. But you can do the math, right? It's if we can we're converting ounces at less than 50 cents, but our valuation is around $2 an ounce. So I love that. I love that we know that we put a lot of work in last year. We put a lot of work into coming up with these discoveries, getting to this point to be actually in a very solid and strength point of strength here that we know that we can add value even if silver goes sideways. Oh, and the upside is because we're 75% silver, we know that we can add significant value to our shareholders if silver goes up, right? Even to our peers, right? We are still one of the highest in terms of percentage of our value of our resource that is actually silver. So we're very excited with this mangoes because it gives us kind of like a, oh goodness gracious, now we know we can really deliver. This is going to add a lot of ounces for when we get drill holes like this.
Yeah, no, well, that's one of the really big tick boxes with this whole ride is that because what we've usually seen or what you've usually seen in terms of the drilling gone by is super high grade. So you've seen 15 kilos for 3 kilos we saw while we're on site, and sort of these multi-kilo hits, but over I guess less meters. How does this change the parameters in terms of your exploration strategy? Because now that you're finding these really big, juicy, I think estimated true width was around 5-6 meters here. This is pretty big. Do you now have to go and focus a bit more on the south of the license to go find more of these sort of larger width uh, uh, licenses?
Absolutely, and we really have like two, maybe three kind of vein types, right? Some are more consistent over a long strike length, and some have a tendency to have these really over the top widths and also grades sometimes. And so Mangos is showing that it's that it can be very explosive and come out with a very higher, high grade and width, right? I like it also. The other side of it is Aguilar, which is showing about 3 kilometers of overall strike length and multiple veins within the trend, right? Which gives a more consistent results. But at the end of the day, we have a table, and the table says what's the average grade, what's the average width, what's the strike, and what's our average hit rate, right? How successful are we? What's our average hit? And then that equals what does it cost? How many meters does it cost to drill this out? And what's that cost, right? So we can literally focus on adding the most amount of ounces for the least amount of drilling, which equates to the overall cost. And so obviously with these kind of widths, that puts Mangos probably at the top of the list right now, if not at the top or the second best vein we have. So it obviously is a big, we're feeling very excited because we know that we're going to be able to deliver in giving a much larger resource when we do the next update.
And now obviously last year was all about this sort of more greenfield, checking out new targets that haven't been drilled yet, adding and this year I was always under the impression it was about adding resource inventory from what you found. How is that started yet? Is now the focus on sort of zoning in on the targets you have found, like Mangos, like Agria, like Morena? Is that the target now to really drill these out, get resources defined within them, or is there still a section that really is still looking at that greenfield, discovering more of these high grade veins? Because I'm sure there's a load more to be found within the license area.
Yeah, it's always a percentage, right? And it's not like this hole won't count towards a resource. It's just making sure and doing the density. And I can say this, um, I want to avoid pitfalls that other companies have had, and even ourselves have had in the past. And so we're going to be doing an internal calculation starting in May. So we'll see that and say, okay, where do we have holes? Where can we add? And really start modeling it internally. So May is going to be a crucial month for us. Guillermo and team are going to be doing that internal model and start doing that internal calculation so that we know it can be efficient and provide better guidance, right? Not that it be some black box. And I almost feel sorry sometimes when you see a bad resource come out or you see a bad PEA come out, and it's like, oh, they told market that it was coming out in August, and they got it, and now they have no choice but to put it out without being able to perfect it or make sure that they can deliver. So we want to be way ahead of that, right? So in May, we're going to be doing the internal, which will help drive us and allow us to do continuous internal updates until we're ready. And we're still, the idea is that at the end of December, or sometime during December, we'll say, okay, this is the drilling that will count towards this updated resource, and we'll start that calculation. But doing it in May helps drive us to make sure we're as efficient as possible and delivering results.
Okay, so that gives you a good 6 7 months to really add in as many outs as possible before the new resource is out. I think Q1, isn't it? You've been mentioning in the past.
That's been our guidance. So it'll be coming out. It'll be released in the first quarter of next year. But obviously, our level of confidence, and we'll be able to provide more guidance as the year progresses with a high level of confidence.
What can we be looking out for moving forward? Because obviously, this is the big milestone that everyone will be looking out for Q1 of next year. That's a little while away. I know you're constantly drilling. How many rigs have you got up at the moment? Where are the next? Are we expecting more results from Mangos, or are we expecting results from other areas? What's the current plan?
Yeah, right now we're going to continue at Mangoes, especially after this hit, and we're kind of understanding the system. It had some old workings, and we found where what's been previously worked and where's it open. So we're going to be there for a while. We're still also back in the middle section. We had some new right of ways and wanted to retest some areas, and that's where we're looking. So over the next few months, still expect. This is just one hit, and these type of veins have a tendency to put out multiple results. We are going to continue to test a couple of new targets. Hopefully, we'll also be getting to Frias, which would be another big opportunity like Mangos, especially because it was a historic mining area. And the nice thing is we've been be able to put over the last 12 months, put out consistent news over an extended period of time. But we would also expect that as we get closer to that resource and there's a higher level of confidence and people are getting an idea of where we're going to be placed, that we'll start moving towards that valuation, right? So um, I truly believe with this mango sin, it might be one of the last times there was kind of a little shakeup in market where things got a little crazy. Silver took a little dive. We're kind of got that behind us, and our overall thesis has only gotten stronger with this last result.
Yeah. Well, look, with gold hitting another all-time high yesterday, it's yeah, it's a good time to. You'd think silver might play a bit of catch up soon. Just remind me on the free up because you mentioned you potentially might be adding some ounces there or doing some drilling there. What was the grade of free ass when it was in production and what sort of the depths that it was being drilled at or mined at?
Oh, I do. Oh, now you're going to ask me a terrible question, but I do remember numbers that were its average grade was maybe 1,500, 2,000, but they had grades up to 15,000, right? But and I'm just mentioning because that's quite normal for around here, right? We see that, and we're seeing that in our drill hole results. And of course, they were taking the easiest stuff, and they normally mine down to water. The water table when was quite normal, because there was no real technology for pumping back then. And even though for us it's just what's in a vein, it's not a whole lot of water. They had no way of getting it out, right? Um, so I don't want to imply that water would be a significant issue. I do not see it being a significant issue, especially with the hanging wall and footwall rock types that we have. So that normally leaves quite a lot because many a times it was 100 meters, sometimes it was 50 meters, but they were really limited by their technology and their mining rate, right? So that's why we're continuing to see things continue to outcrop, and we continue to see things along the entire trend here at Santa Ana.
I'm assuming in terms of mineralogy, it's essentially the same as what you found on the system already. It's argentite. I'm assuming met wise, pretty high up there. Just remind us of what that looked like before when you've done some testing.
Sure. As I mentioned before, we have kind of three different types of veins, and mineralogically, they are very, very similar, right? And so we're not seeing any big differences as we move further south. And our previous results, because argentite will as a silver sulfide, it's great news for us. It's great news because small miners don't like silver, right? But they can't recover. They use amalgamation normally, so they can't recover the silver either, which is great news because it keeps them out. But it floats for us, right? So that's why we're seeing unbelievable recoveries: 96% in silver, 98.5% in gold, and that was just by flotation and gravity. And I don't want to get too nerdy on you, but the gravity con plus the rougher flotation, which just means like one stage flotation, you don't have to clean it up. We were seeing grades that were potentially you could smelt them directly, right? But would produce an extremely high quality precious metal concentrate. I call it the trifecta. We have very high grade, very high recoveries, and the potential for a very high quality concentrate, even the potential to create doré directly without cyanide. And so that's super exciting. But I think when you saw in the visit and you looked at the core, right? Argentite is black. It's little black dots, right? And and the waste material around that was white, right? So we did do some testing recently. It's great, but why not better, right? Is that this would be highly amenable to some sort of ore sorting, right? So we did send a bunch of material, and we're waiting for the final results for that as a optionality. Like the smaller, most efficient plant that you can have, the smaller the environmental impact. We're already not using cyanide for the recovery method. Most likely is the current very simple flow sheet. But if we could add more to that, right, it only makes the footprint smaller and makes it more efficient. And so that's also very exciting. Like I keep telling a lot of people we're in the same peer group despite being the smallest in terms of overall resource, right? Because of our grade, because of our recoveries, because of our quality and our simplified flow sheet. The advantage I have is I can get bigger, right? If everybody's worth $2 an ounce, then the way you add value is add more ounces. And I think we have a huge potential at Outcrop because I think the big differentiators we're under 100 million ounces, but we have all the other differentiators. So that's why we're so excited about this year because we're going to be able to deliver on something that's taken, a good year and a half to get us to where we are today. And we're getting near to the finish line, at least for the first part of that.
Yeah, just one follow up question on the ore sorting, because obviously when we were there, we met with the state director of Tolima in the capital Bagwe, which is the district that Falan falls into. You were looking at doing a pilot plant in cooperation with them. They seem very supportive of the idea. If the ore sorting works, I'm assuming that's really just you can keep the capacity of the mill smaller, but you're going to get so much more on the back end in terms of what comes out, right? So really, fingers. When can we get some news on this? Do you think on the ore sorting, because this could be quite impactful?
Peter, you're too smart for me. That was supposed to be like my big news, maybe potentially coming out later. But yes, that is the basic concept, right? If you're limited in your overall processing size, right, and you can deliver more efficiency to that mill, it means you can get more from bang out of your buck, even if it's just a pilot scale project, right? So that it was a part of the logic of doing the ore sorting. And Tolima, I Tolima's pushing me harder than I'm moving. I'm the one holding the ball on this one, right? That's the level of excitement. And right now, we're actually putting together a potential project description to be just to talk to them and give them more information so they understand because they'll obviously be our lobbyists, right? And so giving them more information just to really bite their teeth into understand what this could all look like. And we're targeting May to be able to put that together. And we've held back on everything else, right? Because I we could have people like, what are you doing well, I'm going to do the permit when I know it's not going to take me as long, right? So that's why I'm going to submit it, right? And then that means making sure Tolima's on board. They know what we're doing and they're supportive. It's kind of our first step, and so we've taken some of our time to do that, but I think we're in a position to be able to enact on that in May. My goal is to really start in earnest that process by the end of the year.
Amazing. Okay, so this is a really big year for you guys, really, isn't it? And it's sort of what we touched on in the documentary. Was in our view, this was a huge year for you because there's so many big milestones coming up in the early 2026. That it, like we said in the documentary, if we're right, hopefully we'll be the catalyst for re-rating. But Ian, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter. Always a pleasure to see you.